A poor black student agrees to an unexpected marriage to a 75-year-old millionaire to save his family. But 7 days later, he learns something that will change his life forever. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching us from. James Carter adjusted his worn backpack as he trudged up the cracked steps to the small apartment he shared with his mother and younger brother. The day had been long, and his body ached from the weight of both his books and the burden he carried for his family. It had been over a year since his father's sudden death, but the aftershocks of that loss still rippled through their lives. The smell of dinner greeted him as he opened the door. It wasn't much, just a pot of rice and canned vegetables his mother had prepared, but it was home. James forced a smile as he stepped inside, greeted by his 14-year-old brother Elijah's voice. "Hey, James, you're late again," Elijah said, glancing up from his homework spread across the small kitchen table. "I thought you said your shift ended earlier today." "I got caught up," James replied, setting his bag down. "How's it going, Eli? You finished that math assignment?" "Almost. It's easy stuff," Elijah said, his voice tinged with pride. Their mother, Loretta, appeared from the small kitchenette, her movements slow and deliberate. James immediately noticed the pale tone of her skin and the faint tremor in her hands. He frowned. "Ma, are you feeling okay?" he asked, stepping closer to her. "I'm fine, baby," she said, brushing him off with a weak smile. "Just a little tired. Don't you worry about me." James didn't push further, though concern gnawed at him. Loretta had been battling diabetes for years, and her health had been on a steady decline since his father's passing. Medical bills piled up faster than he could earn money to pay them, and the treatment she needed was far beyond their means. Still, Loretta insisted on keeping a brave face, even when James knew she was struggling. The three of them sat down to eat together, their cramped kitchen filled with the sound of clinking utensils and Elijah's chatter about school. James listened, nodding and offering encouragement where he could, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the stack of overdue bills waiting on the counter. Later that night, after Elijah had gone to bed, James sat alone at the table, staring at those bills. His job as a part-time server at a local diner barely covered groceries, let alone rent or medical expenses. On top of that, he was juggling a demanding course load at law school, where he often felt out of place. Being one of the few black students in his class came with its challenges: sideways glances, dismissive comments, and the unspoken assumption that he didn't belong. But James was determined to prove everyone wrong. He had dreams of becoming a lawyer, of fighting for people like his family who were often overlooked by the system. Yet nights like this made him question if it was all worth it. He was exhausted, and the weight of responsibility was crushing. He thought of his father, Marcus, who had worked tirelessly as a truck driver to provide for them. Losing him had been devastating, not just emotionally, but financially. Marcus had always been the rock of their family, and without him, everything felt unstable. James ran a hand through his short-cropped hair and sighed. His phone buzzed on the table, and he picked it up to see a message from his coworker, Jordan. "Hey, man, are you coming to that fundraiser I mentioned? It's this Saturday. Free food and drinks. Could be good for networking." James rolled his eyes. Networking wasn't exactly at the top of his priorities, but Jordan had been pestering him about this event for weeks. He typed out a quick reply. "Not sure, man. Got a lot going on." Jordan's response came almost immediately. "You should come. Trust me. You'll want to meet the people there. Who knows, it could open some doors." James set the phone down without replying. The idea of attending a fancy fundraiser filled with rich, powerful people felt absurd. What could he possibly have in common with them? And yet, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that maybe, just maybe, this could be an opportunity. He didn't have much else to lose. The next day passed in a blur of classes and work. James barely had time to think about the fundraiser until Elijah brought it up during dinner. "You should go, James," Elijah said, his eyes wide with excitement. "You're always talking about how you need connections to make it as a lawyer. This could be your chance." "I don't even have anything to wear," James muttered, poking at his food. "I can help you with that," Loretta said softly. Her voice carried a note of determination that James hadn't heard in a long time. "You've worked so hard for this family. If there's even a chance that this event could help you, then you should go." James looked at his mother, her frail figure a stark reminder of why he was doing all of this. He nodded, feeling a mix of doubt and resolve. "All right," he said. "I'll go." That night, James borrowed a suit from their neighbor, an older man who had once worked in sales. The jacket was a little too big and the pants were slightly short, but it would have to do. He couldn't afford to let pride hold him back. As Saturday approached, James felt a growing sense of unease. He wasn't sure what to expect at the fundraiser, but deep down he hoped it would lead to something, anything, that could help him lift his family out of the abyss they were trapped in. Saturday evening arrived, and James Carter stood outside the grand estate where the fundraiser was being held. The towering wrought iron gates loomed before him, a stark contrast to the crumbling sidewalks of his neighborhood. Beyond the gates, manicured lawns stretched toward a stately mansion bathed in warm golden light. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, their polished exteriors gleaming like jewels under the setting sun. James adjusted the borrowed suit jacket, which felt too tight around his shoulders despite its slightly oversized fit. He took a deep breath, steeling himself before stepping through the open gates. A valet approached him, offering to take his worn leather bag, but James shook his head. It was the only piece of himself he felt comfortable bringing into this world of opulence. Inside, the mansion was a spectacle of wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over marble floors, and the air buzzed with polite conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. James hesitated in the grand foyer, feeling as though all eyes were on him. He tugged at his tie, a knot of discomfort tightening in his stomach. He scanned the room, searching for Jordan, the co-worker who had insisted he attend. Instead, his eyes landed on a group of sharply dressed individuals near the bar. Their laughter was loud and unrestrained, and James caught snippets of their conversation. Politics, investments, and weekend getaways to Europe. He felt a pang of alienation. This wasn't his world, and he doubted it ever would be. Before he could retreat, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." James turned to see an elderly woman standing beside him. Her silver hair was styled elegantly, and her navy blue dress shimmered subtly under the chandelier light. Her presence exuded confidence, but her expression was kind and approachable. She held a flute of champagne in one hand, her other resting lightly on an intricately carved cane. James stammered, caught off guard. "It's different." She chuckled, her laughter soft but genuine. "Different is one way to put it. Overwhelming might be another." She extended her free hand. "I'm Evelyn Walker." James hesitated for a moment before shaking her hand. "James Carter." "Nice to meet you, James." She tilted her head, studying him with a curious glint in her eyes. "You're not a regular at events like these, are you?" "No, ma'am," James admitted, his cheeks flushing slightly. "A coworker invited me. He said it might be good for networking." "A wise coworker," Evelyn said with a smile. "Networking is the lifeblood of events like this, but it's also easy to get lost in the crowd." James glanced around the room, noting how the other guests moved in well-practiced circles of conversation. "I'm starting to see that." Evelyn gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. "Why don't we sit? You look like you could use a break from all this." He followed her to a pair of armchairs near a tall window. The noise of the crowd faded into the background as they sat down. James felt a wave of relief, though he was still wary of why this wealthy stranger had taken an interest in him. "So, James," Evelyn began, setting her champagne flute on the table between them. "What brings you here, really? Networking's a good reason, but I sense there's more to your story." James hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but something about Evelyn's demeanor made him feel safe, as if she genuinely wanted to hear what he had to say. "I'm a law student," he began slowly. "I'm trying to build a better future for my family. It's just hard right now. My mom's sick, and my little brother's still in school. After my dad passed, everything fell apart." Evelyn listened intently, her expression softening as he spoke. "That's a heavy burden to carry," she said after a moment. "And yet, here you are, doing everything you can to keep moving forward. That takes strength." James shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It's not like I have a choice. If I don't do it, no one else will." Evelyn smiled faintly. "That kind of determination is rare, James, and it's exactly what people like you need to succeed." Their conversation continued, flowing naturally despite the differences in their backgrounds. James found himself opening up about the challenges he faced, not just the financial struggles, but the racism he encountered daily. He spoke of professors who doubted his abilities, classmates who excluded him, and the constant pressure to prove himself in a world that seemed determined to hold him back. Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. "I know what it's like to feel out of place," she said. "But don't let that stop you. The world needs people like you, people who are willing to fight for what's right, no matter the odds." James was struck by the sincerity in her voice. For the first time that evening, he felt like someone truly saw him, not just as a struggling student or a token attendee, but as a person with potential. As the night wore on, Evelyn shared bits of her own story. She spoke of her late husband, a philanthropist who had believed in using their wealth to make a difference. After his death, she had dedicated her life to continuing his work, focusing on helping marginalized communities. "I've met so many brilliant, capable people over the years," Evelyn said, her gaze distant for a moment. "But not all of them had the opportunities they deserved. That's why I do what I do, to level the playing field, even just a little." James nodded, deeply moved by her words. He had never expected to find such a kindred spirit in someone like Evelyn. As the evening came to an end, she placed a hand on his arm. "James, it's been a pleasure talking with you," she said. "I hope this won't be the last time we meet." I'd like that too," James replied, surprised by how much he meant it. Evelyn smiled, her eyes warm. "Good. Take care of yourself, James. And remember, you're stronger than you think." As James left the mansion that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter had been more than just a chance meeting. For the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, things were starting to change. The morning sun filtered through the cracked blinds of James Carter's apartment, waking him far earlier than he had planned. He groaned, his body still heavy from the exhaustion of juggling work, school, and the lingering weight of last night's conversation with Evelyn Walker. Her words had stayed with him, her quiet confidence resonating in a way that felt almost unsettling. It was rare for anyone to believe in him so openly, let alone a stranger. As he stretched and made his way to the small kitchen, his phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up, squinting at the screen. The caller ID displayed an unknown number. Hesitating for a moment, he finally swiped to answer. "Hello? James, this is Evelyn Walker," came the familiar, measured voice. James blinked, startled. He had half expected their meeting at the fundraiser to end without follow-up. "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Walker. I didn't think I'd hear from you again." Evelyn chuckled softly. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I enjoyed our conversation last night and couldn't stop thinking about what you shared. Are you free to meet today? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." James hesitated. A million thoughts raced through his mind, chief among them the question of why this wealthy, influential woman would want to meet him again. Sure, I can be free," he said cautiously. "Where should I go?" "My home," Evelyn said, her tone warm but firm. "I'll have my driver pick you up. Does 2 o'clock work?" Yeah, that works." "Perfect. I'll see you then, James." The call ended before he could ask for more details. He stared at his phone, the knot of anxiety in his stomach tightening. What could she possibly want to talk about? At exactly 2 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up outside his apartment building. The driver, a polite man in a suit, stepped out and opened the door for James. As they wove through the city streets, James couldn't help but feel out of place. The ride was smoother than anything he'd experienced before, and the stark contrast between this and his usual bus commutes was impossible to ignore. When they arrived at Evelyn's estate, James was struck anew by its grandeur. The towering gates and sprawling lawns were as imposing as he remembered, but this time they carried a sense of foreboding. The driver escorted him to the front door, where a butler greeted him and led him inside. Evelyn was waiting for him in a sunlit sitting room, seated in a plush armchair. A tray of tea and delicate pastries sat on the table before her. She looked up as James entered, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "James, I'm glad you could make it," she said, gesturing for him to sit in the chair opposite her. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied, his voice careful but polite. For a few moments, they exchanged pleasantries. Evelyn asked about his family, his classes, and his work. Her questions were thoughtful, and she listened intently to his answers. But James could sense there was something more she wanted to say. Finally, Evelyn set her teacup down and folded her hands in her lap. Her expression grew serious. "James, I want to share something with you. It's personal, but I think you'll understand why I'm telling you." James leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. "You see," she began, her voice soft, "I haven't always been the woman you see today. Many years ago, I was caught in a life that revolved around power and wealth, blind to the struggles of others. That changed one night when a young black man saved my life." James blinked, surprised. "Saved your life?" Evelyn nodded. "I was walking home late when a man tried to rob me. He had a knife, and I was frozen with fear. This young man happened to be passing by and intervened. He fought the attacker off and stayed with me until I was safe. I never even got his name, but that moment changed everything for me. It opened my eyes to the disparities in our world." She paused, her gaze distant for a moment. "From that night on, I vowed to use my privilege and resources to help others, especially those who've been marginalized. It became my life's mission." James listened intently, the story striking a chord within him. "That's incredible," he said, unsure of what else to say. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Thank you. And that brings me to why I asked you here today. James, I see something in you, something rare. You remind me of that young man who saved me all those years ago. Your determination, your strength, your heart, they're qualities the world desperately needs." James felt his cheeks flush. "I'm just trying to get by," he said, embarrassed. "And yet, you do so with dignity and resilience," Evelyn replied. "That's why I want to make you an offer." The room seemed to grow quieter as she leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with his. "James, I'm dying. I have a terminal illness, and the doctors say I have less than a year left." James's breath caught. He had suspected her frailty, but hadn't imagined it was this serious. I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn waved a hand gently. "Don't be. I've made peace with it, but before I go, I want to ensure that my legacy lives on. My foundation, my resources, they need someone with vision and integrity to guide them. Someone like you." James stared at her, stunned. "I don't understand. What are you saying?" "I want you to marry me," Evelyn said, her tone calm and matter-of-fact. The words hung in the air, surreal and incomprehensible. James blinked, certain he had misheard. "Marry you?" "Yes," she said, her expression unwavering. "It's not about romance or tradition. It's a partnership. I want to legally transfer my estate and foundation to you, and this is the simplest way to do it." James's mind raced. The idea was absurd, bizarre even. "Mrs. Walker, I don't think I can do that." "I understand your hesitation," Evelyn said gently. "But think of what this could mean for your family. Your mother could get the care she needs. Your brother could go to the best schools. And you could use my resources to make real change in the world." James felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. It was an impossible choice, one that could save his family, but at the cost of his pride and sense of normalcy. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Evelyn said with a nod. "Take all the time you need. But remember, James, opportunities like this don't come often. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most profound changes." As James left the estate that afternoon, his thoughts swirled with doubt and confusion. He'd come to see Evelyn out of curiosity, but now he was faced with a decision that could alter the course of his life forever. The days following Evelyn Walker's shocking proposal passed in a blur for James Carter. He found himself walking to work, attending classes, and sitting at his kitchen table with his family, all while her words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most profound changes. Each night, James lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of his room, wrestling with the implications of her offer. On one hand, the idea of marrying a woman 50 years his senior felt surreal, even transactional. On the other, it was a lifeline, a way to save his family from the crushing weight of debt, illness, and despair. But it came at a cost. What would people think? Would he lose what little pride he had left? His mother, Loretta, noticed his distraction during dinner one evening. She reached across the table, her frail hand covering his. "What's on your mind, baby?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. James hesitated, unsure if he should share the truth. Finally, he exhaled deeply. "I got an unusual offer," he began carefully, avoiding her eyes. "A woman wants me to marry her. She's older, a lot older, but she says she can help us, pay for your treatment, Send Elijah to a good school. Get us out of this hole." Loretta's brows furrowed in confusion, but she didn't interrupt. James continued, explaining Evelyn's circumstances, her terminal illness, and her foundation. By the time he finished, Loretta's expression was a mixture of shock and sadness. "James," she said slowly, "that's a lot to take in." "I know," he admitted, his voice strained. "It feels wrong, Ma, like I'm selling myself or something, but at the same time, I don't see another way. We're drowning here." Loretta sat in silence for a moment, her gaze distant. Finally, she looked at him with a mixture of love and determination. "Baby, you've been carrying this family on your back for too long. If this woman sees something in you and wants to help, maybe it's not about what's right or wrong. Maybe it's about what you can do with the opportunity." James blinked, surprised by her response. "You think I should do it?" "I think," Loretta said, her voice firm despite her frailty, "that you're a good man, and sometimes good men have to make tough choices for the people they love." Her words lingered with him long after she went to bed. He thought about Elijah, who was still young enough to dream big but old enough to understand the weight of their struggles. He thought about his mother, who pretended to be stronger than she was because she didn't want to burden him. And he thought about himself, a man who had spent so much time fighting for survival that he had forgotten what hope felt like. 2 days later, James found himself standing outside Evelyn's estate once more. His heart pounded as he rang the doorbell, and the same butler from before led him to the sunlit sitting room where Evelyn waited. She greeted him with a warm smile, though her sharp eyes searched his face for an answer. "James," she said, gesturing for him to sit, "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "I've been thinking," he said, sitting down, "about your offer." "And?" Evelyn asked, her tone calm but curious. James took a deep breath, his hands gripping the edge of his chair. "I'll do it. I'll marry you." Evelyn's smile softened, and for a moment James thought he saw relief flash across her face. "You've made a brave decision, James," she said. "I promise you won't regret it." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Evelyn moved quickly, arranging for a private ceremony with only a handful of witnesses. James signed the necessary legal documents, feeling more like a spectator than a participant in his own life. He avoided looking at his reflection in the mirror when he tried on his suit, unable to reconcile the man he saw with the choices he was making. The day of the wedding arrived with little fanfare. It was held in a small chapel on Evelyn's estate, with only her lawyer, a few staff members, and James's mother and brother in attendance. Loretta, dressed in her best church outfit, gave James a reassuring smile as he walked down the aisle. Elijah looked both confused and awed by the grandeur of the setting. Evelyn stood at the altar, her navy blue dress elegant yet understated. She held her cane lightly, her posture as dignified as ever. When James took his place beside her, she looked up at him with a calm, steady gaze. The ceremony was brief and formal. The officiant spoke in soft, measured tones, and the vows were recited without flourish. James's voice faltered slightly when he said, "I do," but he forced himself to meet Evelyn's eyes, drawing strength from her unwavering expression. When it was over, the witnesses clapped politely, and Evelyn placed a hand on James's arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying an emotion he couldn't quite place, "for trusting me." After the ceremony, there was a small reception in the estate's dining room. James sat with his mother and brother, trying to process the surreal reality of what had just happened. Evelyn mingled with the few guests, her composure unshaken. Later that evening, Evelyn called James into her study. It was a grand room filled with shelves of leather-bound books and a large oak desk. She gestured for him to sit across from her. "Now that we're officially partners," she began, "there are a few things I'd like to discuss." James nodded, unsure of what to expect. "First, I want you to familiarize yourself with the foundation," she said. "It's the heart of everything I've built, and I want you to understand its mission and its impact. You'll meet the team and visit some of our projects in the coming weeks." James listened intently, surprised by how methodical and practical Evelyn was. She wasn't treating him like a placeholder or a pawn. She was preparing him to take on real responsibility. "Second," she continued, her tone softening, "I want you to feel at home here. This estate is as much yours now as it is mine. I know this arrangement is unconventional, but I hope you'll come to see it as a partnership, not just an obligation." James didn't know how to respond. The weight of what he had agreed to was only beginning to sink in. But as he looked at Evelyn, this formidable, compassionate woman who had chosen to entrust him with her legacy, he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. "I'll do my best," he said finally, his voice steady. Evelyn smiled. "That's all I ask." The night ended quietly, but James couldn't sleep. He lay in the unfamiliar luxury of his new bedroom, staring at the ceiling and wondering what the future held. For the first time in years, the road ahead felt less like a dead end and more like an uncertain, yet hopeful beginning. The morning sun bathed Evelyn Walker's estate in a golden glow, illuminating the manicured gardens and reflecting off the large windows of the mansion. Inside, James Carter sat at the breakfast table, his plate untouched as he stared at the steaming cup of coffee in front of him. It had been 2 days since the wedding, and he was still adjusting to the overwhelming change in his life. Evelyn entered the room with her usual quiet grace, leaning slightly on her cane. Despite her frailty, she radiated an air of command that filled the space. "Good morning, James," she said, taking a seat across from him. "Good morning, Mrs. Walker," James replied, quickly correcting himself. "I mean, Evelyn." A faint smile touched her lips. "You'll get used to it. How are you settling in?" James hesitated. "It's a lot to take in. This place is like another world." Evelyn chuckled softly. "It must feel that way, but you'll find your place here soon enough." She gestured toward his untouched plate. "Eat, James. You'll need your energy. Today, we're visiting one of the Foundation's projects." He blinked, surprised. "Already? I thought you'd give me more time to get up to speed." "There's no better way to learn than by doing," she said. "Besides, I want you to see firsthand what this work means to people." By mid-morning, they were on the road, accompanied by Evelyn's assistant, Clara, who sat in the front seat of the sleek black car. As they drove through the city, Evelyn explained their destination: a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood that the Foundation had helped establish. "It's one of our oldest projects," she said. "We provide everything from after-school programs to job training. It's made a real difference for the families there." James listened intently, his curiosity growing. When they arrived, he was struck by the vibrant energy of the place. Children played basketball on a nearby court, while inside, groups of adults attended workshops and training sessions. The walls were adorned with colorful murals celebrating Black culture and history. As they walked through the center, Evelyn introduced James to staff members and volunteers. They greeted her warmly, their respect for her evident in their smiles and handshakes. James watched as Evelyn interacted with the children, her stern demeanor softening into genuine affection. One of the center's coordinators, a middle-aged woman named Gloria, pulled James aside. "She's an incredible woman," Gloria said, nodding toward Evelyn. "This center wouldn't exist without her. She doesn't just write checks. She's here, making sure we have what we need." James nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and responsibility. It was clear that Evelyn's work had changed lives, and now that legacy rested on his shoulders. As the day went on, James began to see the depth of Evelyn's commitment. She spoke with parents about their struggles, encouraged teenagers to pursue their goals, and even played a game of chess with one of the older children. Watching her, James felt a spark of inspiration. If she could dedicate her life to this work, perhaps he could too. Back at the estate that evening, James joined Evelyn in her study. The room, with its towering bookshelves and antique furniture, had become her sanctuary. She gestured for him to sit as she poured 2 cups of tea. "You were quiet today," she said, handing him a cup. "What did you think of the center?" "It was amazing," James admitted. "I didn't realize how much of an impact the foundation had. Seeing it in person made it real." Evelyn nodded. "That's why I wanted you to come. Numbers and reports can only tell you so much. The real impact is in the lives we touch." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. James sipped his tea, unsure of how to voice the question that had been on his mind all day. Finally, he set the cup down and looked at her. "Why me?" he asked. "You could have chosen anyone, someone more experienced, more qualified. Why did you pick me?" Evelyn met his gaze, her eyes calm but piercing. "Because you remind me of someone I once knew," she said. "Someone who saw the world not as it is, but as it could be. You have the heart and the strength to make a difference, James. And you understand the struggles that others can only imagine." James swallowed hard, her words both comforting and daunting. He wanted to believe her, but doubt still lingered. "What if I fail?" he asked softly. Evelyn reached across the table, placing a hand over his. "We all fail sometimes," she said, "but failure isn't the end. It's part of the journey. What matters is that you keep going." Over the next several days, James accompanied Evelyn on visits to other foundation projects. They toured a women's shelter where survivors of domestic abuse shared stories of resilience. They attended a scholarship ceremony for young students, many of whom credited the foundation with giving them hope for a brighter future. Each experience deepened James's understanding of the work Evelyn had dedicated her life to. But as the week wore on, Evelyn's health began to decline. She grew weaker, her energy fading faster with each outing. James noticed the way her hands trembled when she held her cane, the way she leaned more heavily on Clara for support. Yet she never complained or slowed down, determined to make the most of the time she had left. On the 7th day, Evelyn called James to her study. She was seated at her desk, a stack of papers before her. Her face was pale, but her eyes still held their sharpness. "James," she said, her voice steady despite her condition, "there's something I need you to read." She slid an envelope across the desk toward him. Her name was written on the front in elegant script. "This is for you," she said. "It contains everything you need to know about what comes next." James hesitated, the weight of the envelope pressing down on him. "What do you mean?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "You'll understand when you read it. Just promise me one thing. No matter what happens, you'll carry this work forward." A lump formed in James's throat as he took the envelope. "I promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That evening, Evelyn passed away peacefully in her sleep. James sat in his room, the envelope clutched in his hands. He felt a profound sense of loss, not just for Evelyn, but for the guiding presence she had been in his life, however briefly. Opening the envelope, he found a letter written in her unmistakable handwriting. As he read, her voice echoed in his mind, each word a reminder of the faith she had placed in him. By the time he finished, tears streamed down his face, but so did a newfound resolve. Evelyn was gone, but her legacy lived on, and now it was his to carry. The mansion was eerily quiet in the days following Evelyn Walker's passing. The staff moved about with solemn efficiency, their voices hushed as they carried out their duties. For James Carter, the silence felt oppressive, a constant reminder of the absence of the woman who had transformed his life in just a matter of days. The letter Evelyn had left him remained on his desk, its contents etched into his mind. He had read it over and over, each word deepening his understanding of her intentions and the weight of the responsibility she had entrusted to him. "James," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means I have gone, but my faith in you remains. You must understand that my choice to entrust you with my legacy was not made lightly. I saw in you the qualities that the world so desperately needs: resilience, compassion, and the courage to challenge injustice." She recounted her journey, her privileged upbringing, the sheltered life she had once lived, and the pivotal moment when a stranger had risked everything to save her. That moment, she wrote, had opened her eyes to the systemic inequities that shaped the world. "I spent my life trying to make a difference, James. But change is not a solitary effort. It is a chain, passed from one person to the next. Now, I pass that chain to you." At the end of the letter, she included a key and a set of instructions. James turned the key over in his hands, his brow furrowed. It was small and ornate, with a tag labeled "Office Vault." The instructions directed him to a safe in Evelyn's private study, where she had stored documents related to the foundation and its ongoing projects. She had written that the safe contained not only financial records, but also letters, plans, and her vision for the future of the work she had started. That afternoon, James made his way to the study. The room was just as it had been the last time they had sat there together. Sunlight streaming through the tall windows, the scent of polished wood lingering in the air. He hesitated for a moment before crossing to the large wooden desk. Beneath it, as described in Evelyn's letter, was the vault. The key fit perfectly, and with a quiet click, the door swung open. Inside, James found neatly organized binders, stacks of envelopes, and a leather-bound journal. He pulled out the journal first, opening it to the first page. Evelyn's handwriting filled the lined paper, her thoughts carefully recorded over the years. "This work is bigger than any one person," she had written. "It is about creating opportunities for those who have been denied them for too long. It is about breaking the cycles of poverty and injustice that trap entire generations. If you're reading this, James, know that you're capable of continuing this fight." The journal contained notes on everything from the foundation's early struggles to its triumphs. Evelyn had meticulously documented her experiences, offering insight into her decision-making and the obstacles she had faced. James felt a lump rise in his throat as he read her words, her passion and determination shining through every page. Beneath the journal, he found a thick folder labeled "Immediate Actions." Inside were detailed instructions for ongoing projects, including budgets, contacts, and timelines. There were also handwritten notes addressed to specific individuals within the foundation, each one tailored to their roles and responsibilities. As he sifted through the materials, James's resolve began to solidify. Evelyn had believed in him, not as a placeholder or a figurehead, but as someone capable of carrying her vision forward. He couldn't let her down. The next morning, James called a meeting with the foundation's senior staff. They gathered in the estate's conference room, their faces a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. Most of them had only met James briefly, and he could sense their doubts about his ability to lead. He began the meeting by sharing Evelyn's letter, her words echoing through the room as he read aloud. "She believed in all of us," James said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "And I intend to honor that belief by ensuring that this foundation continues to thrive." The staff listened attentively as James outlined Evelyn's instructions and his own commitment to the work. He acknowledged his inexperience but promised to learn, to listen, and to lead with integrity. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had shifted. While skepticism remained, there was also a flicker of hope, a recognition that James was earnest in his determination. Over the next few weeks, James threw himself into the work. He met with each department head, learning about their roles and the challenges they faced. He visited projects in progress, speaking with beneficiaries and listening to their stories. Every interaction reinforced the importance of the Foundation's mission and the impact it had on countless lives, but the path was not without obstacles. James faced resistance from some members of the staff who questioned his qualifications. He also encountered external skepticism, particularly from donors and partners who struggled to see a young black man as the leader of such a prestigious organization. At one particularly tense meeting, a prominent donor voiced their concerns outright. "Mr. Carter," they said, their tone sharp, "do you truly believe you're equipped to handle this responsibility? Evelyn was a visionary. Her shoes are not easy to fill." James felt a surge of frustration but forced himself to remain calm. "I understand your doubts," he said, meeting the donor's gaze, "and I won't pretend to be Evelyn. No one can replace her, but I'm committed to carrying forward the work she started. This isn't about me. It's about the people this foundation exists to serve. If you're willing to give me a chance, I'll prove to you that I can do this." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Finally, the donor nodded, though their expression remained cautious. It wasn't a victory, but it was a step forward. That evening, James returned to the study seeking solace in Evelyn's journal. As he read her reflections on overcoming obstacles, he found renewed strength. She had faced her own share of doubts and setbacks, yet she had persevered. If she could do it, so could he. Looking around the room, James noticed a framed photograph on the bookshelf. It was a picture of Evelyn in her younger years, standing beside a group of children at what appeared to be a school. Her smile was radiant, her eyes full of purpose. James picked up the frame, a quiet determination settling over him. "I won't let you down," he said aloud, his voice firm. "I promise." James Carter stood on the balcony of Evelyn Walker's grand estate, overlooking the sprawling gardens below. The early morning air was crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming flowers. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to enjoy the tranquility, a rare respite from the whirlwind his life had become since Evelyn's passing. But the peace was fleeting. The weight of his responsibilities pressed against him like a heavy stone, refusing to be ignored. In the weeks following Evelyn's funeral, James had thrown himself into his work with the foundation. He knew that the legacy she had entrusted to him was larger than anything he had ever imagined, and he was determined to prove himself worthy. but the challenges were relentless. Every day brought new hurdles, and James often felt like he was fighting an uphill battle against both external forces and his own insecurities. The first major challenge came in the form of the board of directors. Evelyn had intentionally left James in full control of the foundation, a decision that had been met with skepticism from several board members. At an emergency meeting called to discuss the foundation's future, James found himself facing a room filled with questioning eyes. Mr. Carter, one of the senior board members, an older man named Robert Hayes, began, "We all respected Evelyn deeply, but her decision to appoint you as her successor has left some of us concerned. You're young and, frankly, inexperienced. What makes you think you can lead an organization of this magnitude?" James took a deep breath, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He had anticipated this line of questioning, but still felt the sting of doubt behind Hayes's words. "You're right," he said, his voice steady but firm. "I am young, and I don't have decades of experience, but I have something just as important: the determination to continue Evelyn's mission and the perspective of someone who understands the struggles this foundation is meant to address. Evelyn believed in me, and I intend to prove that her trust wasn't misplaced." Another board member, a woman named Linda Grayson, leaned forward. "And how exactly do you plan to do that, Mr. Carter? This isn't just about passion, it's about results." James nodded, meeting her gaze. "I've been studying Evelyn's plans and the Foundation's ongoing projects. My focus will be on expanding our outreach programs, particularly in underserved communities, and ensuring that we're making a tangible difference. I may not have all the answers yet, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone to find them." The room fell silent, the tension thick in the air. Finally, Linda gave a small nod. "We'll hold you to that," she said. Despite the initial resistance, James began to find his footing. He started with small, achievable goals, building momentum that allowed him to address larger challenges. He visited more of the Foundation's projects, from shelters to schools, ensuring that he was present and engaged with the people they served. Each visit reinforced his belief in the work and gave him the drive to push forward. One of the most significant moments came during a trip to a struggling school in a predominantly black neighborhood. The foundation had provided funding for new textbooks, technology, and after-school programs, but James wanted to see the impact firsthand. As he walked through the halls, he was struck by the enthusiasm of the students and teachers who spoke passionately about how the support had transformed their learning environment. In one classroom, a young girl approached him, clutching a notebook. "Are you the man who helped our school?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. James knelt to her level, smiling. "I'm part of the team that helped," he said. "But it's people like your teachers and your principal who make the real difference." The girl beamed, her excitement palpable. "I want to be a lawyer someday, like my mom says you are." James felt a lump form in his throat. "You can be anything you want to be," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Just keep working hard, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As he left the school that day, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work was exhausting, but moments like these reminded him why it mattered. Not all encounters were as uplifting. James frequently faced resistance, both from within the foundation and from external partners. Some donors expressed concerns about the foundation's direction under his leadership, while others questioned his ability to handle the complexities of the role. He also dealt with subtle racism, comments couched in polite language but loaded with implications. At a high-profile fundraising event, one wealthy donor pulled him aside, a glass of champagne in hand. "You've got a lot on your plate, young man," the donor said, his tone patronizing. "It's admirable that you're trying, but don't you think this is a bit ambitious for someone with your background?" James felt his jaw tighten but forced a polite smile. "Ambition is what drives progress," he said evenly. "Evelyn believed that anyone, regardless of their background, could make a difference. That's a belief I intend to honor." The donor raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Well, good luck with that." Moments like these were difficult, but they only strengthened James's resolve. He refused to let the doubts of others dictate his actions. Instead, he focused on the people who truly mattered, the ones whose lives were being changed by the Foundation's work. Back at the estate, James spent his evenings in Evelyn's study, poring over her journals and plans. Her words became a source of guidance and comfort, a reminder that she had faced her own share of challenges and skepticism. In one entry, she had written, "Change is never easy, and those who fight for it are often met with resistance. But the only way forward is to persist, even when the odds seem insurmountable." James took those words to heart, using them as a mantra during moments of doubt. He began to see himself not as an imposter, but as a steward of Evelyn's vision. Slowly but surely, he started to build his own path, one that honored her legacy while reflecting his unique perspective. By the end of the first month, progress was evident. The Foundation's projects were thriving, and James had begun to win over some of the skeptics within the organization. At a staff meeting, Linda Grayson approached him with a rare smile. "You've surprised me, James," she admitted. "I didn't think you had it in you, but you're proving me wrong." James smiled back, the compliment a hard-earned victory. "Thank you, Linda. That means a lot." As James stood on the balcony that evening, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he no longer felt as lost as he had in those early days. He was beginning to see the impact of his efforts, not just in the projects he oversaw, but in the lives of the people who depended on the Foundation. For the first time, James felt a sense of belonging, not just to Evelyn's legacy, but to the mission she had entrusted to him. And as the night stretched on, he made a silent vow to keep pushing forward, no matter how difficult the journey might become. The main hall of the community center buzzed with energy as James Carter stood off to the side, watching the crowd gather. Today marked the grand opening of a new vocational training wing funded by Evelyn Walker's foundation. The event was more than a celebration of a new program. It was a testament to the vision and resilience that had brought it to life. James adjusted his tie, his heart pounding as he prepared to address the audience. Public speaking had never been his strength, but this day felt too significant to avoid. People who had benefited from the Foundation's programs were seated in the audience, along with donors, staff members, and members of the press. Their faces reflected a mixture of anticipation and hope. At the podium, Linda Grayson, one of the senior board members, finished her introduction. "And now, I'd like to invite the man who has continued Evelyn Walker's incredible legacy, our very own James Carter." The room filled with polite applause as James stepped forward. He gripped the edges of the podium, his palms slightly damp, and took a deep breath before beginning. "Thank you, Linda," he started, his voice steady despite his nerves. "And thank you to everyone here today. This isn't just another ribbon-cutting ceremony. It's a reflection of what happens when we work together to create change." James scanned the room, meeting the eyes of people in the audience. Some faces were familiar. Students, parents, and community leaders he had met during his visits to various projects. Others were new, their expressions filled with curiosity about the man standing before them. When Evelyn Walker entrusted me with her foundation, I'll admit I wasn't sure I was the right person for the job, James continued. I was young, inexperienced, and full of doubts. But Evelyn believed in me. She saw something in me that I couldn't yet see in myself. She told me that change doesn't happen overnight. It happens through persistence, dedication, and faith in the power of people. A wave of emotion washed over James as he spoke. He thought of Evelyn's steady gaze, her unwavering conviction, and the countless lives she had touched. This training center is just one example of what we can accomplish when we refuse to accept the status quo. It's a place where people can learn new skills, find better jobs, and build better futures, not just for themselves, but for their families and their communities. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the room. Evelyn often said that legacy isn't about wealth or fame. It's about the lives we change along the way. She left a legacy of hope, and it's up to us to carry it forward. The applause that followed was louder this time, more heartfelt. James stepped back from the podium, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. He had come a long way from the overwhelmed student who had stumbled into Evelyn's world. Now, he was standing in her shoes, ready to continue the work she had started. After the ceremony, James mingled with the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging words with attendees. A young man approached him, his expression earnest. "Mr. Carter, I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "This center, it's going to change everything for me and my family. I've been out of work for months, and now I have a chance to learn something new." James smiled, his chest tightening with gratitude. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "That's exactly why we're here, to give people a second chance." As the crowd began to thin, James took a moment to step outside. The sun was beginning to set, casting the city in a warm, golden light. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this point, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the moments of doubt that had shaped him. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Back at the estate that evening, James found himself in Evelyn's study once more. The room had become a place of solace and reflection, a reminder of her wisdom and guidance. On the desk sat a framed photograph of Evelyn, her eyes alight with the same determination that had inspired him from the start. James picked up the journal she had left him, flipping through its pages until he found one of her final entries. Her words, written in her familiar, flowing script, seemed to speak directly to him. "James, the world is not an easy place, but it is full of beauty, resilience, and the capacity for change. Carry this work forward, not out of obligation, but out of love, for the people we serve and for the future we can build together." He closed the journal, the words settling in his heart like a quiet flame. Evelyn's legacy wasn't just about the foundation or the projects they funded. It was about the people whose lives they touched, the hope they inspired, and the belief that even the smallest act of kindness could spark something greater. James leaned back in the chair, his mind turning to the future. There was still so much work to be done, so many challenges to face. But for the first time he felt ready, not because he had all the answers, but because he understood that leadership wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, compassion, and the willingness to keep moving forward. The night stretched on, the estate bathed in a gentle hush. As James sat in the study, Surrounded by Evelyn's legacy, he made a silent vow to honor her memory by continuing to fight for the people who needed it most. Her faith in him had changed his life, and now it was his turn to pass that faith on to others. Evelyn Walker's work was far from over, and James Carter was ready to carry the torch. Together, through her memory and his resolve, they would build a future defined by hope, justice, and opportunity for all. Thank you for watching to the end. If this story has inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Share this video with your friends so they can hear this story too. Also, check out our other videos. Maybe they will reveal something new to you. See you in the next video.